This video is 16 life and business traps that will stop you from building a meaningful eco business. These are my raw, unedited scripts that I'll later put into coaching material. But I want to make them all free before I put the time and energy in to clean them all up, so you can kind of get a basic idea of what we're going to go through in the coaching programs. All right, so number one, the number one reason that most people, men especially, struggle is to align your life purpose with your business. So, the challenge, the rub is about having ecological values is that you don't sell to ecosystems. You don't sell to Mother Nature, you sell to other people. So you have to actually figure out what other people want. And that's how you align. Is the alignment is what other people want. Many of you, if you're into business, have seen the three squares: the market, the values, and your skills. So that's pretty basic. But let me just give you an example. There's a man named Adam Brockbank, and he was wiring panels for off-grid tiny cabins for weekend rentals. And he would trip over the cables and drop tools, and but he got it working, and now he rents out his cabins for eco-conscious visitors while earning some income aligned with his values. So that's one example. So another thing that's very critical when you're trying to get past this hump of aligning your values and your skills with a market is you have to start small. You have to embrace imperfection, and you have to test. You've got to iterate. There's a wonderful example in schooling of this child. I can't remember the name of the schooling. Maybe I'll put it in the resources if I remember it. But it was a very young kid, like a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old. And he would be surrounded by a group of people, and they were drawing a butterfly. And then each time he was trained, and we're not trained this way, he was trained to accept feedback and make changes. And it was expected, the culture was that he would keep changing it over and over and over and over again until he found, until it got to a point where people were totally wowed. And I wish maybe I can find an example of that butterfly, but it looks like almost lifelike. It's incredible. So that's what you got to do. And the problem is that most of us run up the number one problem that entrepreneurs face. Well, there's a lot of problems, but one of the number one problems is that you get an idea and you get attached, your ego gets attached to your great idea. So you got to let that go and just let people tell you what about your idea is working, what about your idea isn't working. The best book that would help you, they're going to give resources in every one of these talks. The best book that's going to help you is Designing Your Life. And I'll put all the resources in the links in the description below. Designing Your Life by Burnett and Evans. We used that one of the first years that I did a men's group exclusively focused on business. It was incredibly helpful. They basically have you map out 3 different lives and really just pick one. And you do it in a way that really kind of gets you out of your own way, at least in the beginning. So there you go. That's a good one. And the Permaculture Entrepreneur, maybe check that out. I'm not that familiar with it, but I did look up some resources to share with you. And the Purpose Driven Entrepreneur podcast, that may be a good one, but again, I can't endorse those ones, but I'm going to look them up after I'm done here. So the second one would be fear of failure and imposter syndrome. I face that every time I make one of these videos. It's kind of like, who am I? I'm not a billionaire, so how can I teach you anything? And the truth is that I have a great life, and I've gotten over so many gnarly barriers. My fear of failure and my imposter syndrome are much less than they used to be. So you have to kind of talk yourself out of it. You just do, or get other people to talk you out of it. And then if you're not living with a healthy imposter syndrome, you're not really playing big enough. You're playing too small. So here's an example of that. What it comes from, is comparing yourself to others and societal norms. And if you're paying attention to culture, which is a huge topic in my world, the culture is moving less and less in the sense of a balanced, at least in America, sense of a balanced life. There are segments of the subculture that are demanding that, but a lot of the male culture in particular are moving towards this sort of very ancient 3,400-year-old idea that every man needs to be the same Judeo-Christian type or Islamic type. They all have to sort of fit into these narrow bands of what a man is supposed to be. And that will, for probably most of the men out there, that's not going to work. It's going to, especially if you're the type of person who is intelligent enough and sensitive enough to see the problems of nature and harm that are being done in the world, that kind of model's not going to work for you. So you gotta just dump it. My life didn't start until I dumped that narrative and embraced my power for what it actually was. Okay, an example of this would be Leo Morton. He built a tiny home mobile sauna with reclaimed part, wood, miscut panels, struggled with the insulation, and then he started renting it out on weekend events, and now he's earning a great income from it. I don't know how great it is, but he's earning an income, and that's kind of like a way to go. Start small, start with less debt, start with less time, but critically get things done. There's a pitfall that if you just keep iterating and you don't actually put it out in the world, you really need to start something small and try to sell it to somebody. Give it away first if you have to, but then eventually you got to get someone to pay for it. And if nobody's paying for it, then jump out and then try something else. So that's the principle and the practice. In resources, I would go with The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and I would also go with Mindset by Carol Dweck. Not really the book or even the podcast. If you're not familiar with her work, it's really about coming from that mindset, that growth-oriented, failure-oriented, learning-oriented mindset. And I want to say a pitfall that most people fall into. They kind of think that the growth mindset, if you already know about it, is an all-or-nothing phenomenon. It is by no means an all-or-nothing phenomenon. It's a spectrum, and that spectrum will... You're gonna be good in some areas and bad in other areas. So you just want to, success is not about conquering all your weaknesses. It's about that's kind of that Judeo-Christian thing, is that you really got to work on all your weaknesses as a man. It's retarded. It so doesn't work for 99% of the men out there. If you want to be a big success, you got to jump out of that mindset and compensate for your weaknesses by the people you surround yourself with or the world that you put yourself in. That's another program that I work on, calling the ecology of success, or the ecology of prosperity, or your personal ecosystem design. That's a whole other topic we're not going to cover today. And then the next, number 3, is most of us have a difficulty with long-term goals, and that has to do with a lot of the addictive nature of our culture and how it's just getting worse. Because the big corporate entities are subscribing our income away and doing everything in their power to get us to watch more ads. So literally, the more ads that you see, this is interesting. I've never thought about this before. The more ads that you see, the more you're being hijacked. Not because of the ads are hijacking you, but because the content is specifically designed to keep you in the ads. I think that, I'm a YouTube consumer. I think it's a small, and I don't really know that I need to give YouTube more money, but it's a small price for me to pay to keep the ads out of mine and my family's life. So I choose to do ad-free in that program. I'm trying to constantly cut all of my subscriptions to keep myself out of other corporate entities' ecosystems. But if I'll rely on something for information, staying away from the ads, audio, visual, it's critical. Okay. Yeah, we're constantly being pulled in 20 directions. And the more creative you are, the more you're going to have the more you're going to be pulled in all these different directions. So that's especially important for creative types. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about creating a business, you're a creative type. So you need to artificially create things that suck your attention back in. So I recently did I repaired a house. I bought a house that had a tree that fell through it with with an old friend who we wrote up a contract and created a 50-50 business partnership. We would put in equal hours, which we did and we didn't. It was a tough negotiation. I got a little sick during part of it, had some injuries, but we got through it. And then I adopted the Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, as a resource for this. I adopted his question, which is, what's the one thing that once completed will have the largest positive impact in your life and make everything else easier or completely unnecessary? So that, I had, unsecured debt. I had probably $180,000 in unsecured debt, and I paid all of that off. So, but that only happened because I let everything else go, other than my health and my family, and my basic. I'm not going to default on my bills. I let all that other stuff go, and kept my health, my family, my basic cash flow handled, and just focused entirely on that. Some days we would do 6 days a week. Towards the end, we did some 7-day-a-weekers. But I included my family, I included my health, I included the cash flow. Those things I didn't drop, so those are critical. So I'll just go with my example on that one. There's another example I have in here, but so I paid off my debt. I mean, that was insane. That was 5 years of debt I paid off. You got to focus on one thing until it's done. Now, that was a bad example in this case because I have 30, 40 years in construction and real estate. So that was a late in the game project for me. For you, when you're starting off something, it's got to be much smaller and you got to iterate it. And I would also recommend Essentialism by Greg McKeown. That's a wonderful book that we also read in my men's group and early on with Design Your Life. We also read Atomic Habits, which was a good one that sort of pushes you in that way. Atomic Habits is a little bit less relevant, so it's not going to hold you on one thing. It's going to give you too kind of broad of a template to go with. Okay, balancing ego, ambition with authentic values. So the problem is that a lot of times we'll face, and this is a tough one for me, a lot of times I face a tension between ecological integrity and profit. There's a couple of ways to approach this. One is that you can sell to people who are like-minded. And then that actually moves everything in the needle in the direction that you want to go. So if you sell to people, so for example, I went from being a yoga teacher to a lot of men's work, and then went into my business world. I had my business world the whole time, but I went back to business and I focused entirely on, back then it was called green building. Then it's changed to eco building and regenerative principles, but it's always been the same thing. And so I didn't really have a way of focusing on one, I didn't have a way. I chose to focus on my region as my project rather than a specific work type. So in my region, the best way that I could, or the way that I figured out how to do it was all my marketing material, all my PR material, all my sales material, all focused on putting my website, my YouTube videos, my social media, although I don't have much social media, in front of people who have an ecological value base. So just working with ecologically valued people who hold that ecological value base, you're going to be able to lean more into the ecological principles that you care about. And then for me, for example, I hit the edge of that model. Like I couldn't integrate enough of my ecological principles into mainly a remodeling business that I had. So now I'm trying to move out of that into something that can align more deeply with my ecological principles, which turns out to be teaching. I have a skill. I've been doing content creation and teaching for 30 years. So yeah, that's my example. And then there's also like just a societal thing. Our society doesn't reward it as much. It's still rewarded in some centers, but in places like India, it's really becoming hot. And in places like even Indonesia, it's becoming hot. And in Australia, it's becoming really, really important. And in all over Europe, most of Europe, it's becoming really, really powerful. So depending on what your product is, there's lots of markets. You'd have to go into markets that actually have those people. So don't create a product where, if you want to sell composting bins and you're in a part of the country that's very anti-environment and just doesn't really care about organics and doesn't really care about regenerative stuff, then that may not work. But anyways, that's a bit of a sidebar. Let's see. An example that I would give here is there's a man named Ethan Bloom, and he built handcrafted composting toilets for eco campgrounds. He was struggling. He made the hinges imperfectly, panels, patch leaks, but he sold units to 3 campgrounds, and then he keeps earning income from that. I'm not sure if he's still in it, but anyways, let's see. Moving on. So these are a couple of the heat just went off in the sauna, which is probably good because I've been in here a long time. Whew. Again, these are unedited videos, so I will edit up all this audio and create a nice video, but I think that'll probably be behind a paywall because it costs a lot of money to do it, and I don't have the time or money at this point to do it. I'll try to do it. We'll see if I can do it for free. But you need money, so that's the other part. So I'm not going to do it actually. So I'm going to take my own advice and say I'm not going to make a highly edited video because I don't yet have the bandwidth or the resources to do that. Unless somebody comes on to help me out and believes in the mission of the channel and the mission of what we're doing here and wants to partner up. And I'm just going to say that here. I recently listened to Simon Squibb. He's really good on business. I would recommend him for your entrepreneurial endeavors. And he really recommends starting with a co-founder. You have to be emotionally intelligent, good with relationships, and you have to write up a really good contract, and you got to really trust the people. You got to make sure that they're honest people first. So when I went into business with my partner, honesty was number one. Honesty and integrity, and follow through. Those were the things that I saw in him, and I knew that his skill base wasn't going to be anywhere near to mine. And we did complement each other, and I was very visionary and project manage oriented and can hold the whole thing to the end. And he was very day-to-day hands-on, but we butt heads, and you got to be okay with that because you don't want someone who's just like you. You want someone who's almost diametrically opposed to you. Okay, so that is, balancing, trying to get, your values lined up with the market. And that was actually titled Balancing Your Ego. And I didn't really talk about ego. I think we're going to have to talk about that another time. That's such a huge topic. So I would, in terms of, balancing your values with the market, I would, these are ones that I actually haven't, researched it, but I'm going to research them after this podcast. So again, this is the unedited version. One researcher I would go to is the Responsible Entrepreneur, Carol Sanford, and then the Regenerative Enterprise Institute Ethical Entrepreneur Podcast. So we'll see if that one's any good. I'm not sure. I hope so. So then the other thing is you need, so you need sort of a clear roadmap. This is a little bit of a catch-22. Because you have to be flexible enough to change, to pivot, but you at least got to have a roadmap. You at least got to have an end game. So you got to get to that first service or product sale so that you can get feedback. And so for example, so the more specific and narrow and in some ways boring your plan, the better. So Jessica Parass, for example, she built small mushroom kits, measured containers, was just created in with all the challenges. And now she runs a small mushroom kit business, generating consistent revenue. So again, it's really about testing it, and just getting it out there and sell one service, get one client, do one project, and then learn from that and then sell another. So another resource for this would be, again, the Lean Startup. That's not again, but the Lean Startup. That's a good one. Eric Rice's. Eric Rise. I have actually not read that. It's on my list. It's come recommended from Ali Abdaal and a few other people that I respect in terms of their journey. Again, the Permaculture Entrepreneur by Holtzman. Yeah, that's good. All right. Identifying a financial, number 6, identifying financially viable ventures. Yeah. So how do you identify those ones that are going to last? So, this is where you got to really get your ego out of the way. So this is probably a better one that would be good to talk about ego, because it's the ideas that we get attached to. The problem is overconfidence is at the same time the most powerful force in the universe. I am most definitely not a fan of Donald Trump, but the one thing that man has in spades is overconfidence. I am a very mixed fan of Jordan Peterson. He's brilliant on some aspects and completely often wrong on others. But one thing he has in spades is overconfidence. I don't really like anything that Ben Shapiro says. I think he's completely off the rails all the time. But he's a hugely successful businessman and is just exuding overconfidence. So those guys are an example of where they tapped in to a niche, the niche called very extreme right-wing ideology comfort zone. I'm going to call it that. There is, on the other side, very left-wing extreme ideology comfort zone too. I'm not familiar with the people who are getting rich on those. I don't think there's as many. Probably not. There might be a few. But anyways, that overconfidence feeds their business. But at the same time that those 3 people are incredibly powerful and successful in what they do, there's 100,000 men who have, taken their overconfidence to their grave or to their bankruptcy and failures. And you shouldn't be afraid of failures and bankruptcy. You got to embrace that on your journey. But you always have to temper your ego. And like Ray Dalio, I think, was one of the best people for this particular principle. You need to, the last Twitter post that I saw of him was, he said, don't let your view of how things should be get in the way of seeing how they actually are. And I think that's probably the main problem with ideological, I don't want to say ideological, it is kind of ideological. So we're trying to have a business that has an ideology behind it. And that ideology behind it is we're doing a business that benefits people, planet, and also includes profit. So the triple bottom line, we're trying to do that. So in order to do that, you can get stuck in, and I see it happening in the media all the time, especially the green and left-wing media. We attach onto these hopeful narratives, which aren't letting us see what's really happening. And that's how Donald Trump got elected in the first place. That's how he got elected the second time around. This is not a political podcast, but there's very few of you out there that are interested in starting regenerative businesses that are Donald Trump fans. Let me know in the comments if you are, because I don't want to alienate you, because I can't see, it's difficult for me in my narrow ego bandwidth to see how someone could support Donald Trump and care about the environment. Those two things don't really mesh for me. But if you got a way that you make it work, I'd really be interested to see how you do that. So yeah, you got to get out of your own way, because your ideas are going to get in your way. So you want to have, it's a paradox. Some of the best teachings in life are a paradox. You actually have to have this kind of incredible level of self-confidence, but be incredibly flexible about how you're approaching it. So I think one of the ways to mitigate that, I would say the principle in practice would be that you're fixated on serving the person, solving the problem, but you don't get fixated on your particular method that's going to happen. Like if you want to solve the problem of packaging, wasteful packaging, like maybe you get into the mycelium mushroom packaging world, but then maybe you find out that there's another system out there besides mushroom cultivation packaging engineering that uses the mycelium for the packaging, that's actually more effective and going to solve the problem for cheaper and get around to more people. You have to be able to pivot. So you focus on the problem, not your narrowband solution. And if you've got that problem, then that narrowband, then your solution will evolve. It's a dance. There's no right answer. I can't tell you what's going to be the answer. It's something that you're going to have to constantly go back and forth between your ego and what's serving people and serving the planet. And viable in a market, and works for you. Like, everybody has a different income necessity, and really knowing what your income necessity is critical. All right. That's enough of that one. Yeah, and this is a good one. Start Small, Stay Small by MJ DeMarco. So MJ DeMarco, he's super hardcore capitalist, but he's really smart. And this is a principle this isn't one of the written principles, it's an in-between principle. Like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you want to sell a property, then you should probably know that Donald Trump has a principle where he puts something really dramatic and beautiful in the front of everything that he develops. Right, I don't like Donald Trump, but I know that, and I've done that on every one of my properties that I've worked on, and it's worked out every time. So I completely 100% disagree with 99.9% of what that guy does. 98%, or a couple things I think he gets right. But still, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Everyone has something to teach you. Okay, good. So number 7 is business skills. I'm not going to say much about this. Other than don't underestimate the importance of business skills and the ease of acquiring them. It's not that hard. You just have to work. You have to know when you're starting a business, you got to do accounting, you got to do marketing, you got to do sales, you got to do taxes, you got to do operations, you got to do inventory, you got to do all that stuff. Now, if you're anything like me and you hate 99% of those things, then what I would recommend is that you try to outsource and simplify everything. So, for example, years ago, I started using FreshBooks for my remodeling construction business because it just made it so much simpler for me to do all the accounting and stuff. And I could create a little system. So that's that whole, everybody's hot on this idea of create systems, not products or whatever. You want to create a system rather than a goal. That's right. Create a system rather than a goal. I would say it a little differently. You want to create a structure rather than a goal, and a support structure rather than a goal. Support structure that then creates a system, but close enough. If you focus on creating that system, then and the support structure inside of that system, then those skills can become irrelevant. You still have to know a basic amount of stuff, but you can get past a lot of it. Blah, 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 blah. It's a lot of examples. I'm going to move on. Scaling without losing regenerative integrity. Let's do scaling later. It's too much. Interesting. So, I would just say that you're always going to have there's always going to be an inherent challenge between scaling and maintaining integrity. It's never going to go away. You're just going to, there's no easy answer for that. If you follow all these other principles, that'll just be part of the path. And that's later anyways. We're talking about starting one up. So financial pressure and insecurity, that's insecurities we already talked about that. So I have, I still have a mortgage, not a very big one. We live in California, and we eat very clean food, so we have very high food costs, and we have medical costs. We got a lot of costs. I got a high overhead. I have a daughter. There's a lot of homeschooling stuff that we do, and some private tutoring because we're outside of the normal school system. So, I had a vision of myself of having very low overhead, and that's not happened. So I have to take into account the overhead that I have, and design my business accordingly. And what that means is that I'm not going to go out and just start a business and go into a huge amount of debt. That means that, unfortunately, I have to maintain a cash flow while I'm doing that and just minimize my expenses. So that would be kind of just the nuts and bolts of it is, don't quit your job. You're going to have to focus on two things at once. Unless you have like a sure thing, when I did the investment property, it was very low risk. I already knew that we had so much equity in the place that we were, there was risks. Like we could have got shut down by people or, county or whatever. But the risks were lower, and we could have always gotten out with just a lower profit. In our area, given the project we took on. So you got to assess the risk and the reward of your business endeavor. And again, start super small. Again, that example of the home sale is not a good one because it's too big. Okay, so managing time between all of your stuff. How do we do that? I think I'm just gonna refer to Cal Newport and Deep Work and all of his books, Essentialism, Designing Your Life. All of those books are really amazing resources of how to design, getting things done. Those are all all those resources are going to help you manage your time. I don't want to be a time management guy. Frankly, that's not my forte. So again, this goes back to what you're good at and what you're not good at. I don't have to, become a master of time management. I'm just not good at that. But what I can do and what I am going to do is get other people and structures and systems that manage my time for me. So again, for example, this is not a perfect example, but when I did the investment project, it managed my time. The business partnership and the demands of that, and the demands of my family, and the demands of my health, those all managed my time for me. I didn't manage them. That's a good one. That's really good. So you don't manage your time, have systems and structures that manage your time. That's genius, man. Whew. Glad we talked about this. I didn't even know that one was in there. Emotional burnout and lack of support. So this would be, I think should probably be maybe even number one. There's a great saying that if you have the right team, you'll get to the right outcome that you're looking for, the right business. But if you're the wrong team, doesn't matter what you do, you're gonna go the wrong direction. So we all need, we focus on the Elon Musks and those people that are like, they're crazy, man. They're nuts. They're not normal. So you don't want to be like them. Like their lives are a wreck. They're miserable in a lot of ways. And, and totally out of balance and don't have all the things that we want. So you want to do an inventory of really what do you want? That's another principle that could be embedded in here. Just do an inventory. What do you want? Why do you want this? I think designing your life will help you do that. But focus on that first. And if you want to have like messed up relationships and, siblings and friends and parents that are all pissed off at you and, no free time and not travel at all, then fine, go do that. But if you want a normal life, really get clear on what those are. And then that's going to really help you determine what kind of business you're going to go into and how big you're going to make it. One of the most important questions that most people don't ask is, what is enough? And you really should start with that. Start with what is enough. There's a book, Your Money or Your Life. That's the book that if you haven't defined enough and you need more resources around that, Your Money or Your Life is the one for that. Let's see. So in my personal system that I've been writing and developing, it's what I call your personal ecosystem. And your personal ecosystem of support needs to be kind of the first thing that you focus on, so that there's always somebody else holding you up when you're feeling like you can't push forward. In a lot of ways, my last project was my business partner and my wife. And those two things held me up a lot, and some of my friends and some of the men's groups that I have. I have a business men's group that was moderately operating at that point, and then I have a quarterly, more spiritual, emotional men's group, and those really held me up. So you got to have some sort of support structure, and if you don't, don't expect to make it. Don't buy into this like lone wolf ideology that somehow only the men who isolate and work hard are the ones that make it, because it's actually totally false. It's just a weird narrative that we adopted culturally in America. There's a tiny bit of that, but it's a tiny bit. It's not the source. Okay, I'm moving on to the next ones because I'm running out of steam here. Yeah, and this would be a good one. Oh, here's one. So here's a resource. Tribe by Sebastian Junger. I haven't read that one yet, but I think I started that one. Anyways, look it out again. And then I would join a men's group. The not all men's group are created equally. Just keep joining them until you find one that really lifts you up. Yeah. All right. So this one I'm not going to talk about much. Regulatory and logistical barriers. That should be in, if you're really good at that, great. You comment on this on how we should do that. That's not my forte. I'm the big thinking content creator guy, the big project visionary guy, and I need people who do that to compensate for my weakness. So I'm not going to really tell you how to do that. I'm just going to say you got to either do that or have somebody else who does that for you. Oh, this is interesting. Permaculture regulation guide. I didn't know there was such a thing. I'm not sure about that. Maybe there is. But yeah. Okay. Managing energy and focus. I think it's in David Allen's Getting Things Done that he talks about scheduling the most important tasks when you have the most energy. So that's one thing to do. Another thing that's really critical. So this is one that I've really struggled with. So there's two things to this. There's energy and focus. So there's, on a more esoteric level, you have just like your vital spiritual energy, and that's driven by a sense of purpose and meaning. So you've got to have a sense of purpose and meaning. And we all struggle with it from time to time, unless you're in some sort of a rigid ideology that tells you what your purpose and meaning is. The people that I work with, the men that I work with, are definitely usually not that. Yeah, so enough said about that. But so managing your energy, there's that spiritual vitality. So, my purpose is to make this world. I'm here to do my part to reinvent civilization, to invent civilization into one that lives in harmony with the earth and lives in harmony with each other. Now that is never going to happen in my lifetime, but that's the mission I'm on. It's this Buddhist idea that when you're on the right path, you find that the destination keeps getting farther away. But I'm clear on my purpose, so that gives me energy as long as I don't fall into imposter syndrome and let myself stop because I think, like, who am I to do anything like that? That's you're always fighting imposter syndrome when you're trying to maintain your purpose energy. Now focus, there's so many hacks, like I don't bring my phone into my bed. I leave it in my kitchen on the charger. I have a wind down routine. I wear a Whoop, and I monitor my sleep stats so I get really good. Now this is energy and focus. I monitor my sleep stats so I get really good energy focus. I have a glucose monitor so that I manage my glucose levels, because if you're not monitoring it, you can't manage it. And me in particular, I've struggled with glucose, and it's not just me. Our whole culture struggles with glucose. I mean, look at the diabetes and pre-diabetes and all of the over-obesity. Carbs and sugar are at the core of that. So I measure and manage those elements that help me with my energy and my focus. Another element of that is really just all the health stuff, like meditation. Mostly on, sometimes off. And that every day I do that, I have more focus. And cleaning up my environment and creating support structures, and those, letting your support structure know that you need to focus and you need to focus on energy. I do that quite regularly. And I have a lot of energy and I have a lot of focus and I'm distractible and I'm prone to low energy. So I'm just telling you, these are the things that work. If you've already got a lot of energy and a lot of focus, then again, you don't need this one. Just you're the person that does that, and then you need help on the other ones. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so Whoop. I would do ADW diabetics, Stello, glucose monitor. It's the most affordable. I haven't looked this up, but maybe look up Anders Ericsson. Not sure what his Peak. Oh yeah, Peak. Yeah, I haven't read that one yet, but that's probably a good one. All right, sustaining optimism and grit. Setbacks. It's no matter how much we hear that failure is the road to success, it still hurts. And I think we need to just practice sitting in the pain of setbacks. My back's a little sore. Sitting in the pain of setbacks. That's the root of addiction, is when you're trying to just get out of pain. And addiction is, we all know, is kind of the path to hell. And a creative type, we're more prone to addiction the more creative we are. So you have to develop the muscle of sitting in your pain. And literally that can look like sitting in a sauna for a little longer than you want. I had a wonderful Native American teacher, and he used to say, us natives, we like to, there's pain in life, so we like to schedule it in. That's why we do the sweat lodges. And, the more I do those sort of, you hear all the bros, the tech bros and the development bros, they do their cold plunge in the morning. That's what it is. It's just you're developing that tolerance of pain. And we don't like to talk about that in our culture, but we need to increase our pain tolerance. Now, let me say that with a huge, huge caveat. Pain is a signal to stop in a lot of cases. So there's definitely good pain and bad pain. And the good pain is what Michael Pressfield in The War of Art would call resistance. So you want to push through resistance. And then the bad pain is overworking when you're harming yourself, like a sharp pain in a joint or, blowing up at your wife or whatever. Those are bad pains. So you want to avoid those kind of things. That could be a whole hour-long conversation in and of itself. It's a tightrope. It's a practice. It's just a practice that you keep working on your whole life. Grit by Angela Duckworth. That's a good book for that one. Okay. How to avoid 15 habits that distract or undermine your productivity. Let's see, how can we do that? Well, I already gave you the example of how I leave my phone in the other room. I have a very strong wind down routine. So again, it almost comes back to pain again. You're gonna have to go through a little bit of pain to reinstate. It comes back to pain and your support structure. If you're an alcoholic, you need to go to AA. If you're if you're an overeater, then maybe you need to go to Overeaters Anonymous. You need a support structure that is, has kind of a track record for helping people like you. Whatever your particular thing is, and then measuring things like these are my Whoop and my glucose monitor. It's really unproductive when it gives me immediate feedback. So feedback is another key element. You get that feedback, it makes it so much easier. I used to drink, 3 or 4 times a week, maybe 2-3 times a week, strong IPAs. And then I kept getting feedback, my brain wasn't working as good, and then I was getting chest pains, and I'd still do it. And then I got the Whoop, and I started seeing the one-to-one correlation between like every time I drank and what would happen to my recovery. Just tank, 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 tank. It took me a couple, two plus years, maybe even a little more than that. And now like I'll have a glass of wine or a beer once every 4 or 5 months or something, once every 3 or 4 months, you know. And even that is kind of like, I don't even know if it's worth it, you know. So, and when everybody told me that that's not really possible, you have to be a 100% abstainer, or you're just going to fall back. And what I found was that this feedback loop created a new identity for me. So having a feedback loop that shows you exactly what you've done to waste time and do habits that undermine your productivity is really good. Then you also got to, again, be super honest with yourself. Like, is it important for you to chill with your family in the evenings and watch a YouTube video, or, you know, once a week watch like a movie or something, or, you know, like if those things are important to you, then don't call them unproductive. Just call them part of your life, you know. Yeah, you set up systems and structures of people that will help you with those distractions and those habits. You don't do this alone. This one in particular, you don't do alone. You don't do any of them alone, but that one in particular. Okay. All right. And, you know, James Clear, Atomic Habits, probably a good one for that. All right, health and well-being. How do you sustain health and well-being? I already talked a bit about that, so I'm not going to do too much more here. While you're building a business, I do think that the whole like grind thing is, you can do that when you're young. Now I'm 56, so I'm over that, you know, like I'm not interested anymore. I'm going to go slower. And that's okay with me, you know, because I've asked myself the question, what do I really want in life? And I don't want a life that's grinding. I want a life that's a little more balanced. Now, some of those guru types are going to be like, no, you're never going to make it. It's like, you know, fuck you. You don't know that. You have no idea. You've never sat in my shoes and tried my mind and my body and seen what I can do. Now, I'm going to try to be humble and honest and, you know, see where I'm failing and put in support structures that are going to help me. But, you know, you can. I think this is what I'm trying to say here. If you're young, you got no attachments, you got no family, you got no overhead, by all means, go bananas. You know, spend every waking hour other than sleep, diet, and exercise. And, you know, some sort of mind-calming meditative practice. If you have those in place, then you can work an incredibly huge amount of hours and be incredibly focused. I would say another part of that would be to honor the natural cycles of energy that we talked about before. If you're really good in the morning, then you want to schedule most of your important stuff in the morning. Most people are really good in the morning. It's pretty standard with the, you know, everybody's cortisol goes up in the morning and then comes down. They kind of have differing cadences, but most people are better in the morning. Even I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if that's changeable. You know, there's a new study out that showed that there's 4 different types of circadian rhythms. But in any case, follow your energy flow and do your important tasks when those are higher. And you just create a support structure. And then this is critical again. It's always back to the support structure. Create a support structure and a system that has all those wellness pieces and health pieces intact. Okay, that's it. I hope that's helpful. I hope it moves you forward on starting a business, or, you know, tells you, well, I don't want to do any of that, so I'm going to just keep my job. Whatever it is, I hope it's moved you forward. So please leave comments below, ask me questions, and let me know if there's any particular topics you'd like me to flesh out, or if you'd like to work with me personally. There should be a link in the description of the channel and possibly the video. Okay, have a great day.